Hello, and a very warm welcome to the English Story Nook. We are so glad you could join us for today's story. Today, we're diving into a story about a creative woman who learns that things are not always as they seem, especially in relationships. Get ready to discover a story about the quiet, personal battle for self-worth and the incredible strength it takes to reclaim your own narrative. It's an inspiring journey about learning to see the truth and building a life on your own terms. Before we dive in, if you enjoy our stories and want to support what we do, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and consider buying us a coffee on Ko-fi. There's a link in the description below. Every like, subscription, and small contribution helps us keep creating great content for English learners like you. And now to the story. He was loud with quiet intentions. Filipa Brito, an architect of considerable talent, found herself navigating the intricate, often treacherous, currents of a relationship that the world saw as perfect. Her partner, Tony Botha, was an entrepreneur whose charisma was as vast as it was pernicious. He was a man who could command a room, his laughter echoing with a confidence that drew people in, making them unwitting accomplices in his narrative. Yet, behind the closed doors of their minimalist apartment, this charisma curdled into a tool of control. Tony's influence was insidious, a slow-acting poison that had gradually eroded Filipa's self-worth, leaving her questioning her own perceptions, a classic case of gaslighting. He would subtly discredit her achievements, framing them as minor successes, while his own ventures were painted as monumental triumphs. This constant, low-level psychological warfare had left her feeling isolated, a satellite in his ever-expanding orbit. Her current project, a revolutionary design for a sustainable urban living complex, was her anchor in this swirling sea of doubt. It was her application for a senior partnership at Solid Fluidus Wyke Throughput, a firm at the vanguard of architectural innovation. More than a career move, the project was a reclamation of self, a blueprint for a life she wanted to build, one founded on her own principles. Her friends, Ina Vandevert and Lucia Alves, saw the dimming of Filipa's inner light. They had watched her vibrant, assertive personality fade, replaced by a hesitant, almost apologetic demeanor. Their attempts to pierce the bubble Tony had constructed around her were consistently deflected by his possessive charm, leaving them frustrated and deeply concerned. They could read between the lines of Filipa's cheerful facades, sensing the deep unhappiness beneath. The inciting incident, when it came, was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, public execution of her confidence. At a dinner party, ostensibly celebrating Tony's latest acquisition, he turned his attention to Filipa's architectural model, which she had brought at his insistence. "A quaint little project," he'd announced to their audience of colleagues and friends, his tone a masterclass in condescension. "Very earnest." The laughter that followed, though polite, felt like a physical blow. The humiliation was acute, a spotlight illuminating the cage she hadn't realized she was in. The carefully constructed illusion of their partnership shattered, and in its place, a cold, hard clarity emerged. His words were not careless, they were a calculated act of sabotage. The pernicious nature of his charm was suddenly, starkly visible. A spark of defiance, long dormant, flickered to life within her. The following morning, a bouquet of lilies, ostentatiously large, arrived at her office. The attached card read, "Forgive my candor, just so proud of you. T." It was a quintessential Tony maneuver, a public performance of magnanimity designed to indebt her, to make her the ungrateful one if she failed to swoon. Her colleagues, including her boss, Charles Chawan, were predictably charmed. "He's certainly a keeper," someone remarked, twisting the knife of her isolation. The gesture was a perfect example of how he managed to dissemble his true intentions behind a veneer of support. Ina, however, was not deceived. Witnessing the scene, she pulled Felipa into the sterile quiet of the archives. "He's doing it again, F," she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "This isn't love. It's a performance. The insidious way he chips away at you. You have to see it." For the first time, Felipa didn't defend him. Ina's words found purchase in the cracks that had formed the night before. The gaslighting had almost convinced her she was overreacting, but Ina's validation was a lifeline. As the deadline for the partnership presentation loomed, disaster struck. A key file containing the final renderings for her project was corrupted. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Then, a chilling memory surfaced. Tony borrowing her laptop the previous night, his mellifluous voice explaining he needed to check a quick thing. The realization was a gut punch. He would sabotage her career to keep her tethered to him. It was a betrayal so profound it felt unreal. A plot from a film, not her life. The thought that her success might lead to a Pyrrhic victory, winning the promotion but losing herself completely, was terrifying. With only hours until the presentation, despair gave way to a surge of adrenaline. She wouldn't let him win. In a move of quixotic desperation, she raced back to her apartment and retrieved her original hand-drawn sketches. They were raw, filled with annotations and smudges, a world away from the polished, sterile renderings. They were also the unadulterated soul of her design, created before Tony's influence had begun to seep in. Presenting them was a monumental risk, an act of professional defiance. It felt like she was about to burn her bridges with the firm, but it was the only path forward that felt honest. It was a gamble, but in the wreckage of her confidence, it was the only move she had left. She had to find a silver lining in this mess. Felipa stood before the partners of solid fluitis Wyke throughput. The room was an intimidating sea of stern faces. Behind her, projected onto a large screen, were not the slick, computer-generated images they expected, but the ephemeral, passionate strokes of her initial sketches. Her voice, though trembling, resonated with a newfound authority. She spoke of biophilic design, of community-centric spaces, of architecture that breathes with its inhabitants. She wasn't just presenting a project, she was testifying to her own resurrection. The initial surprise on the partners' faces slowly morphed into intrigued focus. They were leaning in, captivated by the raw, unvarnished passion she exuded. Just as she was building to her conclusion, the door swung open. Tony burst in, a mask of feigned concern perfectly in place. "There you are, darling," he boomed, his voice a mellifluous performance of support. "I was so worried. We had some technical issues, you see," he said, addressing the partners, the consummate sycophant trying to align himself with power. He was attempting to frame her as flustered and unprofessional, a damsel he had to rescue. But he had miscalculated. His attempt to dissemble was too obvious. The partners, having just witnessed Felipa's powerful, articulate defense of her work, saw his interruption for what it was, a desperate power play. Charles Shawan stood up. "Thank you, Tony," he said, his voice edged with steel. "Felipa has the floor." He turned to her, his expression one of genuine admiration. "Felipa, your vision is undeniable. Your passion is compelling. This is the kind of thinking we need." In that moment, Felipa knew she had won more than a promotion. The ubiquitous presence of his influence in her life was finally receding. That evening, there was no grand party. Instead, Felipa shared a bottle of wine and a pizza, with Ina and Lutaya in her now quiet apartment. The celebration was in the shared laughter, the easy silence, the unspoken understanding of the battle she had won. They spoke of the future, of her plans for the project, of the quiet joy of reclaiming one's own narrative. It wasn't a loud victory, but a profound one. She knew there would be vicissitudes ahead, but for the first time in years, she felt equipped to face them. The silver lining of the whole ordeal was this rediscovered strength. The next day, Tony appeared at her door, his charm replaced by a desperate, pleading energy. He apologized, promised to change, his words a familiar, hollow script. But the spell was broken. Philippa saw him clearly now, a man so hollow, he had to excavate the confidence of others to feel whole. "It's over, Tony," she said, her voice calm and resolute. She was no longer a character in his story. She was the author of her own. The finality in her tone was a slammed door, a bridge she was happy to burn. His pleas felt as ephemeral as a morning mist. Months later, Philippa was thriving. As lead architect on the Viridian Spire, her project was taking shape, a testament to her resilience and vision. The ubiquitous reminders of Tony had faded, replaced by the satisfying hum of a life well lived. She had reconnected with the people who mattered, her life filled with the authentic connections she had starved for. The scars of her time with Tony remained, faint lines mapping her journey to see through the vicissitudes of a toxic love. But they were also reminders of her strength, of the quiet, unwavering power of a woman who had chosen to build her own foundation on her own terms. She had learned to read between the lines of people's intentions, a skill that would serve her well in her now much brighter future. Her past felt like a Pyrrhic victory for Tony. He had won battles, but she had won the war for her own soul. Her initial quixotic gamble had paid off beyond her wildest dreams. That's the end of our story for today. It is a powerful story about finding your own strength and trusting your instincts. What do you think is the most important lesson Philippa learned on her journey? We would love to read your ideas in the comments. Sharing your thoughts is a great way to practice your English. Remember to check the description for some great learning materials to help you practice even more. Thank you for spending your time with us at the English Story Nook. Keep up the amazing work with your English studies. We are so excited to see you again for our next story. Until then, happy learning.